Technically speaking, the small alien is our real alien. The other one is actually another alien. It's a potential creature, living creature as well, that those small aliens use to travel through space. Those aliens live on a planet where other creatures live around. They take those big, dumb aliens, but very powerful, they treat them, have their face split open and just fit in there and travel space this way. So they actually become strong creatures, physically strong. They're actually very clever beings, but they need to be physically strong to travel space. So that's the full-size alien, that's the big alien, which is actually, as we know now, the suit. It's a quarter-scale replica of the full-size alien we've built for the show. What you do, you make an armature in there with the alien. It's all articulated. The joints are all articulated, and you put armatures on some of them, and then you have like rods coming out. You got about 4 or 5 guys moving every part of the creature around. Later on, they're going to be removing those rods out of the scene. It's like a blue screen technique, pretty much. What you can get, you can make this thing look like it's running full speed on a screen, and you get much more life to it. And still, at this date, I think CGI doesn't convince me as much as the rod control puppet do. So I think maybe in the future we'll be able to do that with CGI. So far, it hasn't been convincing enough, so we still try to do it that way. I use the guy in the suit for a lot of our scenes, where the guy actually, you see just the upper body of the creature with the arms. You really have a guy in there, plus mechanical hands, mechanical face, but you could potentially have someone. But then you show the legs on their own, then you cut with the body again. I guess that's at that point when the magic of editing and directing and those things all work together. You end up thinking that, how did they do that? So those legs have been built like the rest of the creature as separate elements, because sometimes I need some type of legs, sometimes I need another type of legs. I mean by that, some legs need to be articulated with armature wire in there, so I can put them in a specific position. But then the upper torso needs to be the hero one. Another time I need to have like just a mechanical leg like this that actually move up and down for different scenes. So what I wanted to do is being able to change not the full creature every time, and that's also for a budget reason, not to build like 50 creatures, maybe 3 of them with a different group of, members, like the arms, the legs separately. We got some pretty convincing shots of those legs coming in the shot. When you see the guy screaming in front of it, and suddenly you see those 2 legs jumping in frame. And those came out actually really good. Those are probably some of my favorite shots. This is a typical stunt arm we've used. The quality of the paint job is as good as the hero arms. The difference is only in the fact that those guys are positionable. You put the position you want before the scene, actually. And the actor splits his arm inside there. The actual hand of the actor reached that point. After that, it's all either, when I use mechanical arm, full mechanical arm with cable control, or in a case like this one, in the stunt one, just a wire armature to put this thing in a position I'd like to see it in. So this is the same concept on the other hand. It's actually painted exactly the same way, except it's our hero hand, which is the actor puts his arm inside that socket basically, and his finger hands up here. From that point on, I've got a mechanical hand with full of cable running all the way up to the outside, and all that stuff is done by puppeteers. So what the actor has to do is actually mostly moving his forearm, and the hand motion is done by puppeteers outside the scene, actually. This is the way the creature looks actually when it's put together. So you see it all together right now, in a closed position with the face closed. Abdomen, joint, and then you got pelvis and all the legs. The first time the alien appears in the movie, it looks like this, the face. As you see here, you got in the design of the creature a big split in line here that goes all the way up to the throat inside here. The doctor are trying to play with it, and at that point the thing opens. One head just opens, the other one, it's an open head already that the Okun can walk in and start lifting the skins. That's another head. Then you got a third head for the revealing of the alien inside. Then you got a fourth head, which is a head where the small alien pops out. For example, when the alien is lying on this operating table and the face opens. For a process like that looks like, I'd say, 30 seconds in the movie, we had to build 4 heads just for that process. This alien you're seeing here inside the head of the big suit is actually the one we use for the coming out of the creature. This head was actually lying on an operating table. I had 2 puppeteers underneath this operating table, and basically push the alien from the inside out, have the arms coming out first, and that alien was built just for that specific scene. In the scene in the laboratory, the only reason this thing can actually walk around And that's another reason why you can combine designs. Is the lab was designed in such a way we have a lot of pipes on the ceiling, which allow the creature to actually grab pipes and walk around holding itself. That's an interesting point of showing how we can actually work out the sets at the same time you work the creature, and everything is actually end up being the same kind of concept. You know, it has to work really tightly together. So this is actually a final hero alien. That's the one that lives in the suit. That's the one that does all the motion. What you're seeing here is all the harness. One puppeteer was wearing the full harness to move the arms. Guys were working on the fingers from here, working on the head from there. So this is about a 7 puppeteer deal for just this guy. All the plates inside were moving. A lot of lights, different points in there, plates moving up and down. The arms are all mechanical, so they wrap back in, fingers moving forward, backward. This one got shot in the head twice for a hero shot when the guy gets killed. We were supposed to use a stunt one for that, but we ended up shooting so close that we wanted to show one moving and then dying slowly. This has been built just for an insert shot only of the eyelid of the creature opening when he wakes up inside the suit. And what Ron, the director, wanted to do is actually being able to see in the eyes the reflection of the actor. This could have been done as a post-production thing, as an insert, but actually Ron really wanted to use it on the set actually, because he could get the real reflection. He didn't have to like match up things on post, and there's so much post-production happening on this movie already. I don't think we want to add anything else. What you're seeing here is like 2 of the remaining aliens that you actually see in the movie in the containers, in the tanks. Those are, in the story of the movie, the 3 aliens they found years ago, you know, like the Roswell experiment story. We tried to make them look pretty trash from the beginning, so they looked like they went through a crash. The first approach was to do a dry tank imitation of water. It did look okay, I'd say. Ron Emmerich looked at it and said, no way, we have to put water in there. Suddenly we had to change the thickness of the tank, get some new tanks overnight, put them up there, fill them up with water, and put those creatures in there. The water always helps to make them look bigger, it distorts them, and they look twice as realistic as they would look.
Digital effects. I think a real generic way of explaining it is most people consider anything that involves a computer. And there's really 2 distinct fields. One is compositing. The other aspect of computer work is CGI, computer-generated imagery. The difference between the 2 is compositing, again, you're putting the elements together, and CGI, you're actually generating elements. The same way if you were shooting an element, you're actually creating something that didn't exist before.
A wireframe is our representation of a solid object. And how you get there basically are points in space, and that can be done either by an animator taking a point in space and saying this is connecting the dots basically, and creating something that has a mass and has a solid volume to it. Once we've created the wireframe, then we have to have a certain point of view on that wireframe, and that changes for every shot. The beauty of the wireframe is once it's built, we can use it for any shot. You can put the F-18 flying straight towards you, and we in the computer have what's basically a virtual camera, and you can put the camera in the front of this 3D object and it looks like it's flying towards you. If you want to go to the side, you can move it to the side and you get the wings and you can show the rotation, and just off of the 3D object and this virtual camera that's used in computer graphics. Texture mapping is the next step. Once you've got your wireframe, which is your 3D representation to connect the dots, you then need to take a real surface and basically paint it over top of this texture.
Usually computer-generated images look synthetic. Therefore you want to get some dirt, some natural images in there. And the easiest thing is to actually take pictures of dust and dirt.
We photographed, you know, like a real F-18 on a tarmac, and in every, like, down to every screw, and, you know, and texture mapped it on a wireframe. I think, you know, like, we went a big step there. You know, it looks really good.
On this show, we had several sets of challenges. One of the biggest ones was the dogfight scenes. We're animating hundreds of airplanes in the air at the same time. And to do that plane by plane is just a really painstaking process. It takes a really long time, because you have to do not only each F-18 or each attacker, but then each attacker shoots the attacker firing, and each F-18 fires missiles and tracers, and there's hundreds and hundreds of objects to keep track of. And then even some of the objects that are like the F-18's missile fire, they emit fire and smoke as well, so you've got literally thousands of things to keep track of in the scene. Since we're doing this all with computers, computers are really good at doing that, good at simulating all those things. So we've written programs which do nothing but simulate the dogfight scenes in a way that we have a lot of control over them.
You will see in this movie scenes where 150 F-18 American jets will be fighting over 250 alien attackers in the most spectacular aerial sequence ever filmed. Now, this wouldn't have been possible without digital technology, without computers.
The solution before we were brought onto the show was to hand animate all of this. So it's just as if you were to do it with motion control, do it with some traditional methods. You have to actually hand animate each F-18 or each attacker. And then they were doing things like copying some different paths and whatnot. But it was still basically a ton of hand animation. It would take several days to set up one shot and then render it, and then several days to do another shot. So we were able to take it from about a 4 or 5 day turnaround per dogfight and bring it down where we can basically produce 2 dogfights in one 24-hour period.
I've never seen CG, computer-generated imagery, come out as fast as on this show. I mean, Roland can call in and fax us over a storyboard at 9 o'clock at night and have an animatic and have animation by the next morning. And normally that would take a week to 2 weeks, you know, on normal pace.
Because there's a limited amount of horsepower in the computer, even though these are really fast computers, we have to use primitives, or these little dots, to represent each of the airplanes at first. You can see it's only stepping a few frames per second. It's only stepping very slowly through the dogfight, and that's so we can tweak each of the individual parameters as it's stepping through. And I can go through and adjust sliders or grab my equations and make adjustments to my equations in real time and see how that affects the dogfight. And then as soon as I get the motion the way I want it, as soon as I get the numbers the way that we want it for a particular shot, then I can go in and substitute the real airplanes for these dots.
One shot alone, which is 21 CG planes, 2 motion control planes, and they're all firing 2 missiles except the president's plane, which is firing 1 missile. So all of that, and the shot just kept expanding and expanding. And eventually when we finally went to go back up the shot and get it laid off back to a backup format DST, we found out that the shot had totaled 52.5 gigabytes for that 1 6-second shot.
One of the beauties of compositing is that rather than trying to do everything in camera, trying to do everything live, where you would have to have a model, you'd have to have a spaceship to scale, you'd have to have pyro, and all of that happening at the same time, by compositing in layers, it allows us to choreograph each layer perfectly and then put them together.
What really helps the director and the filmmakers is that what it really is offering when everything is evaluated is flexibility. So if somebody's shooting model miniatures of an F-18, let's say, once that's shot, the lighting, everything as the way it was shot, you're locked into it. So that by the time you go to put that element together, way down the line, 6 months later, after you've shot it, and all of a sudden the director says, oh, guess what, I've changed my mind, this isn't a day scene, it's now a night scene, and you want to change lighting or you want to change the nuances of that element, it's extremely difficult because you're locked into certain parameters. Where with computer-generated imagery, you have control of the lighting, you have control of it just the way you would in a shooting environment, and that you always have control of changing those things based upon what the director now wants to do with it. So flexibility is really what digital has to offer the filmmakers.
When we build a composite in this particular software, we usually work from the back to the front. In this particular composite I have here, the very back element was the destroyer itself. Another element that we added to this composite was the CG, or computer graphic, beam and particles. And I took these 2 elements and added them on top of the destroyer before I added the White House. So this was like an intermediate layer. And we wanted to give the impression that this beam was coming down and striking the White House and exploding it. We have the destroyer in the background, which started out as a model. We have the lights, which were shot as a separate piece, and we've added those together. We have the beam coming down with the particles timed right, so it hits right. And then we had the nice edge here where the pyro comes up. It's nice and soft, and you pick up all the debris that's in the original element to give you a convincing composite that we're actually blowing up the White House.